people might think we're all doing the same thing. Yes, we are doing similar and in parallel, but it's not enough. It is still not enough. Exactly. And
Вирішую проблеми.
Доброго вечора, ми з України.
Good evening. This is Joe Lindsley with our Speak Freely podcast from Ukrainian Freedom News with my friend and co-host Zakhar Pikh in Lviv, Ukraine.
We have amazing guests from Washington DC. Yeah, right.
Yep,
Washington
correct.
DC. She's Ukrainian, but now she's American professor. It's Maryna Baydyuk. Hello, Maryna.
yeah, hi Zakhar and JP. Thank you for having me, and I'll be happy to talk to you about what our organization does and maybe share some personal stories as well.
Yeah, and your organization is United Help Ukraine.
Yes.
And we'll share the website, and we will talk about that and all the work you're doing since the full-scale invasion of Russia on Ukraine since February 24th, but also what you've done since 2014, because that's when Russia did start the war against Ukraine. But
Yes.
first, so you grew up. You're from Ukraine originally, right?
Yes, I'm from Kiev, Ukraine, and I grew up in the capital in Kiev, and I attended 3 years of medical school. This is National University of Ukraine, Bogomolets University. 3 years of med school before I came to the US, and those were amazing years, and we still go to Kiev often, of course, when we can. My family was in Kiev up until February or early March. My mother and my father are both doctors. My mom is retired. My mom has a green card, so she's a resident of the U.S., permanent resident. But she travels back and forth. So my mom actually was in Kiev when the full invasion started on February 24th, and I was calling them a week or so before when we started receiving those warning signs that the invasion is imminent. I told them to leave Kiev. No one listened to me. They said it's impossible. All those, you guys you don't know what you're talking about. So they stayed. And of course, it was interesting how I actually met the first signs, the first bombing and first news on TV is that was a group of us collaborating on and thinking and planning what we need to supply before the invasion starts. So we were all on Zoom. There were people from Razom, Sunflower, Nova Ukraine, some other people that we gathered together that day on Zoom meeting, planning who's going to purchase what in terms of meds, paramedic backpacks, IFACs, tourniquets. We're talking what's needed for territorial defense units who we knew were completely, they completely lacked any type of medical supplies before the invasion started. But anyway, so we're talking about what we're going to do, and then boom, someone says, "Listen, I just heard on the news they started bombing Kiev, Kharkiv, other cities in Ukraine." And this is when our group said, "Okay, we'll talk later." So we hang up and then started calling our families, friends, started preparing for, we knew it would be a long effort, and it still continues. I called my mom 4 a.m. at their time, right? And then I said to my mom and my sister, immediately seek shelter. So they did. They were surprised to, of course, to receive a call from me at 4 a.m. But they heard explosions. So they went to the bomb shelter, and they stayed in the bomb shelter for, a week or so, probably up to, I think, almost 2 weeks until the bombing kind of subsided a little bit. So I said, you have to evacuate immediately. There's a little bit of window. We don't know what's coming, right? So we know that Russians are close to Kiev now. We actually have a family home in suburbs of Kiev, and we knew that Russian tanks were there. So I told my mom and my sister, if you have if you can escape, it's now. You have to run. So After a certain time, my mother and my uncle went to Poland and stayed there, and my mom is here in the US now. My sister remains in Lviv, Ukraine, and I'm sure you guys are going to meet her pretty soon. She's helping us with our warehouse. United Help Ukraine has a warehouse that receives humanitarian aid and medical supplies. And my sister is one of many volunteers who are helping to receive, distribute, sort, and do all kinds of work at the warehouse now. So that's about my family and where they are right now.
Unfortunately, now it's a very typical story. You know, like a million families
Yep.
around
And I
Ukraine
consider,
have the same.
yeah, Zakhar, I consider my family lucky. We
Yeah.
all our family members are still alive and healthy, which is amazing. And
Yeah, it's really very nice.
yeah, and then
Yes.
we had a family friend. So I told you about the house that this is a family home of my husband's. His grandmother built the house, years back. And then we usually we stay at the house because it's close to Kyiv, but also it's in the village, so the kids can run around, have fun. So in that house, we had a family friend. He was a young man, 28 years old, who just got engaged, and his girlfriend and him were staying in the house when they started shelling and bombing, and they couldn't get to the basement in time, and the rocket hit part of the house where our friend was, and unfortunately he got severely wounded, and they couldn't leave because of such severe intense shelling. They stayed in the house until it stopped, and then there was a brave neighbor who offered to drive them to the hospital, but I think the wounds were too severe, so unfortunately our friend died in the car while being transported to the hospital.
It's everything what is going on. It's very bad.
Yeah, I agree.
Every soul.
Yep, every life
is not here with us.
Every single person every single person who perished, a child, a woman, a man, we will remember them. It's heartbreaking and devastating for all of us to hear those stories.
Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm please excuse me, but I want to go back to 2014, and I want to ask you about how it started for you and for your organization. How it started. Tell us, please, because a lot of people now in the world and in Ukraine who are not like a volunteer or do something, they just maybe donating money for their different organization, and they cannot understand, they don't know how that organizations are working, how is everything is going on there. So please, can you tell us like your story about your organization from 2014 and till now?
Absolutely. Thanks, Zach. So we as an organization started in 2014, and before incorporated in we got incorporated in September of 2014, starting with Maidan, the winter of 2013-2014. A lot of activists here, Ukrainians mostly, here in Washington, D.C., started gathering at the Russian embassy, Ukrainian embassy during Maidan, a Russian embassy, then the White House, protesting brutality of police on Maidan, telling Putin hands off Ukraine then. We knew that behind Yanukovych, president at that time, corrupt president at that time, we knew that Putin was standing behind him and giving him orders on killing those civilians on Maidan, the first 100 that died fighting for independence of Ukraine. We call them Heavenly 100. We started protesting, started getting together. And then when we saw that in March, then that Crimea was annexed by Russia, we again went out by the White House. We were there saying we must do something now, because this is just the beginning of a big war. And
I'm sorry, and what was the reaction of the White House?
I mean,
all the time
remember
during the 2013, 2014.
Yeah, if you remember, it was like silence almost, right? So President Obama at that time, he of course condemned the Russian annexation of Crimea, unlawful
Yeah,
annexation.
we had. I think we
But
had the same president, Yushchenko, as Obama, something like similar.
right, so of course there were some
Like
sentiment.
just a president with nothing.
But yeah, exactly. There, of course, they were saying that they condemned this, and but there was nothing was done. So the Crimea was lost. But then we started seeing, actions of violence, and the war started. This is when the war started in Donbass region, right, Donetsk and Luhansk. And at that time, we all of us started sending supplies, because we knew how army was supplied and that time, right? So we knew we had pretty much, the army had nothing. So it was from a very simple, I don't know, like, boots and uniforms.
Yeah,
To
we still don't have boots and uniform, but in that time we didn't have army at all.
At all,
So,
exactly. So it was a lot of volunteers, a lot of people who came to defend, and then we were sending, each and every one of us separately was sending thousands and thousands of dollars worth of supplies. And of course, again, our priority was to send life-saving medical supplies, such as first aid kits, combat first aid kits. So we were doing that, but also, you name it, we were sending it to the front lines then. And this is 2014. And then at some point we decided that, listen, we're all doing the same thing. We have to organize, and we should become a nonprofit organization with a status that is documented. And then people, especially Americans, could definitely donate more and legally. And, and we can then contribute more efficiently, because as an organization and a visible organization in DC area, we certainly we're able to do much more than each individual within our group could ever accomplish. So it was then 2014 that we started sending med supplies, and again, pretty much everything to help out and help out our defenders. A lot of those supplies went to, again, volunteers, medics, and it was mostly to save lives. That was our first and foremost motto that we still maintain this, and then we still are committed to saving lives. And this is number one priority still.
yeah, it's our difference between Ukrainian army and Russian army. We do our best to save the lives.
Right, and then we really try our best to do that. Then our focus shifted when the war was at the I would say more stable stage. We were telling people, were asking us, Americans, our friends, our neighbors would ask us during 15, 16, and later, it's been 8 years, we would receive the same question after 2016. What's happening in Ukraine? Is the war still going on? I'm like, yes, it's not on the news, but the war is still going on. Every single day we hear there was a casualty here, there, or sometimes more than a few people die or get wounded in Donbass region. And I always tell them, if you don't hear on the news, it doesn't mean it's stopped. It's continuing. It's at a different stage. So at that stage, when Poroshenko was a president, the army was receiving supplies. And of course, we were very proud of the accomplishments of Ukrainian army and how it got restructured and reformed. And it was really, for many of us, this is the time, and then we can see now that Ukrainian army is I would say it's the best in the world. We could definitely see that if we can defend Ukraine against Russian invasion, against millions of Russians who are coming like nonstop, right, just trying to target civilians and infrastructure and everything else. And our army is absolutely doing incredible, amazing job defending our country. But we had, as an organization, our focus had changed during 2016 up to 2019, 2020, up until pretty much February 2022. In the way that we mostly supplied medical equipment and rehabilitation equipment to hospitals, military hospitals, and rehabilitation centers. We worked closely with Irpin Military Hospital and Rehabilitation Center. We provided some specific equipment.
Sorry to interject, but you said Irpin. I mean, Irpin is the suburb of Kyiv, which we've seen the genocidal atrocities. And is that hospital still functioning?
As I know, that rehabilitation center is destroyed, right?
Well, yes, we just actually, I just talked to the head of the hospital this morning, and we got some pictures from him. So the hospital is still there. So the walls are still there, but it's severely damaged. So we just talked to him that we will be helping with the rebuilding efforts, because there are pretty much no windows right now in the hospital. A lot of damage to the structure of the hospital. So they will start rebuilding process, and we will be helping with funding this effort for Irpin Hospital.
And that I think it was very expensive equipment there, right?
We had some. So what we did in 2019, we shipped an entire container, 40-foot container, full of medical equipment and pretty expensive equipment worth probably $500,000 or more to Irpin directly. And with that equipment, we also, there was medical equipment, also those special ER beds that everyone is asking for right now, right? So this is something that any American hospital has, but in Ukraine, it's a huge deficit. Not that many hospitals would have those very useful, but in such deficit beds in Ukraine now. So the hospital was well equipped, and we knew that people who worked in the hospital, all the doctors, were really trying to help their veterans and soldiers as much as they could. They worked tirelessly to rehabilitate those soldiers, and we saw some good results with soldiers coming out of the hospital being able to walk again, function, and it was great effort overall, not just by us, but also by hospital staff providing very adequate and professional help to wounded and to the veterans. And we continued to work with Irpin Hospital over the years. And again, as I said, now when Irpin was an evacuation effort. I wouldn't share stories here, but it was really heroic effort of the staff evacuating patients and under shelling and bombing, and they did evacuate, and they tried to save as much equipment as possible. Now they're returning back, and so we will be helping with rebuilding and also sending equipment again, because we understand it's not going to be just Irpin that we see, but we hear so many requests, and we get so many requests now, that so many hospitals that were in the territories occupied by Russians now are empty, damaged, or destroyed.
Wait, Maryna, two questions on that. One, did you see, and maybe you don't have the numbers on this, but or an idea of this, but was there a higher rate of cancer among veterans of the ATO, the war in Donbass, than you would see in the regular population?
That's a good question, GP. I don't have the stats, but usually it's the case, but we can definitely maybe follow up on that and then check for the statistics. But we did help several wounded, several veterans that developed cancer. And we were specifically helping Dima Fesenko. He came here to run a marathon, the Marine Corps marathon, right? And he was really, even though he had cancer, but he was trying to push himself hard to, be active, run, and he's been here. He came here to DC several times, but unfortunately, we lost him a couple of years ago. He died of cancer, unfortunately. And then now we're helping his wife. She is joining the military, and we just had a request from her. She was looking for helmets for herself, for a helmet for herself. So we said, well, we were helping, your husband so many years ago, and then now we're helping her because those connections remain with us forever. So if once we help someone, it feels like they're part of our family, they're part of our group. A lot of times we maintain those connections, and this is what really made us position us right now. When the invasion started, it positioned us with a lot of networks, a lot of connections and network of volunteers in Ukraine. We were able to quickly establish all the logistics, get the warehouse in Lviv, get the shipping company moving our goods and our aid as fast as possible, and then volunteers in Lviv assembling packages or fulfilling requests, specific requests that are coming from different units, especially territorial defense units, and then getting it delivered to the front lines as fast as possible. So that's a priority. So those connections, those personal connections that we've acquired over 8 years, they are with us, and then we use them to effectively help right now, sending what's really needed. And we know we have direct connection with the unit. We have direct connections with many hospitals. We know the heads of the hospitals. We know the staff. So we don't use anything that we don't vet or we don't check. It's all very straightforward or very direct, and we supply only what's needed.
How would you define, what happened in 2014? In my mind, like if the Ukrainians did not declare sort of their independence from Putin's puppet regime in 2014, if Ukrainians did not take their democracy back in 2014, we wouldn't have the war today, because Ukraine would not be the free society that it became. How would you describe what happened in 2014? And do you think people in Washington, which obviously is a very important city here in this regard, understand 2014?
Yeah, that's a good question, GP. So in 2014, and this it also remains part of our focus, is what we call raising awareness. In 2014, we created several groups of our volunteers that would pretty much knock on every office door of the senator and congressman. And if there was a bill on the table, they would go around talking to them, trying to educate them about what's happening in Ukraine, why. And even though it's not a full-blown invasion like we see right now, in 2014, that's the beginning of the war, and we knew it's not going to end right anytime soon. So we tried to do our best, and we kept doing it through all these years, and we still do it now. We call, we write, we go directly to congressmen and senators. Now it's a different story. At that time, Ukraine was a bit ignored, right? Our calls were, I wouldn't say ignored, but at least they were kind of like brushed off, because, well, it's a conflict, right? So there are pro-Russian separatists in Luhansk, Donetsk region. Yes, they want to join Russia. So it was very, people didn't believe that there was no separate, like, it was all propaganda that made people in those territories really believe that they will be better off with Russia, but that wasn't the case. We tried to educate to make sure American society understands the history behind this conflict and this war, and also the things that we can do to support Ukrainians then, and then we can support now. So of course, the level of support now is unprecedented, right? This is like, we couldn't even dream of like a tiny bit of what we have, what Ukraine has right now in terms of support. And this support, we can definitely see that without that support, Ukraine would not withstand a Russian aggression. And with support of the US and other countries around the world, Ukrainians can defend themselves. And this is what we've been asking. Even before the invasion, we again got together as an organization, and there are a couple of other groups here in DC area, such as US Ukraine activists. There are other organizations such as Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. There is US Ukraine Foundation. So some of them are less active, some of them are more. Razum from New York, another organization that is very active in DC area now. So what we're doing is we're holding rallies, and we started those rallies at the White House on January 8th. We went there and we said, we need sanctions now, because if we don't impose any sanctions on Russia, they will invade. We were asking to stop Nord Stream 2. We were asking to cut off SWIFT. We've been asking that since January 8th. Every single weekend, we were out there. People would come, and we had large rallies. Several thousand people would come, rally at the Lincoln Memorial, at the White House. There were marches. And of course, when the invasion started, February 24th, people gathered at the Russian embassy first. Right after, we heard the explosions, we heard the news. Hundreds, about 100 people or so were there at midnight, talking to press. Press was there. We were talking to press, and saying that we need the Ukraine. The U.S. government can do something immediately, because we wait another week or so, it's going to be too late. And the U.S. government did wait, and of course, the help that Ukraine received, not in a timely manner. We understand that could have saved some more lives, right? So this is what we're trying to say, that we cannot just wait another day or so. And
as this goes on, do you see support remaining steady, or do you see it waning a little bit among the people you encounter in Washington, for example?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So there are two things. So first, just as an example, our organization, we were rather small, right? So we had an income from donations, maybe on average about 100,000 a year. And since February 24th, right? So in only 2.5 months, we have reached about $28-30 million now in donations.
Wow.
It's only within just couple of months.
Wow. Yeah, wow.
I would say JP and then Zach. So I would say you are right. They're going down, right? So because it's been 2.5 months, we understand people. It's very hard to sustain that high level of activity for anyone.
Yeah, as I told to Joe, that people tired of Ukraine in the world.
Yes.
They are tired of the bad news and all of that disaster things, and they want to stop watch the news about the Ukraine, and that means stop helping, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
right.
I can understand them, of course.
Yeah, and we do too, right? So with this, what we're trying to say, that even though they are going down, they're stabilizing, still we get a lot of calls and a lot of offers to help. Even this weekend, for example, I'll just give you an example. We have, I think, at least 2 or 3 events, fundraising events on our behalf. So we have a piano concert, and then we have a picnic organized by some civil society in Alexandria. And there's something else that I'm missing. Oh, even I think next Wednesday, we're going to have event at the brewery, also fundraising for us. Oh, and then we have a happy hour social or like a social event for people to gather. And, also proceeds will go to Unite Help Ukraine. So and then next month, I think in June, I'm going to New York because there's going to be a big gala for doctors from Columbia University Hospital and New York Presbyterian hospitals. They would fundraise again for us to start start purchasing some specific surgical equipment for hospitals in Ukraine.
And that's with our mutual friend, right, Dr. Mark, is part of that.
That's right. Yep.
And he's an orthopedic surgeon at Columbia University Hospital in New York, who came to Ukraine to first understand the situation so that he could better help form, some good alliances in America.
I have a question about the American hospitals and rehabilitation centers, if they are available and for Ukrainian wounded soldiers, because I saw a lot of posts that a lot of soldiers going to US and got their medicine help
Mhm.
for free after the war with Russia. Is that true? And how it's working?
Yeah. So there is another organization that specifically is focusing on receiving soldiers and providing them with medical assistance. It's called Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. They do have a large Walter Reed hospital here, right in Bethesda, and this is a military hospital. We've had before in 2015, 2016, we've had several wounded who came to the hospital for rehabilitation, including I think he's now General Gardichuk, Igor Gardichuk, or General. He's I think he's general now. Anyway, so he was also rehabilitated here in Walter Reed Hospital, and we got to meet him while he was here for the treatment. I know that at that time it was hard to there were some problems from either Ukrainian side or I think it was some issues, but I'm sure there will be more and more soldiers coming in, and I know that a lot of hospitals will be happy to provide medical assistance and treatment to the soldiers. And I know that probably we might be also asked to help with some things here on the ground, but usually it's Revived Soldiers of Ukraine who does all the documentation and brings soldiers here for treatment.
And Maryna, and again, your website, unitedhelpukraine.org. And what would you say, what are the biggest needs? First, you could, I guess, maybe two parts to this. The biggest needs Ukraine, from your perspective, that Ukraine needs right now and that your organization needs at this moment.
So for Ukraine, we understand that the biggest needs are for territorial defense units. Those are first aid kits, number one. We have supplied now between several organizations, including ours. We have supplied, for example, tourniquets, right? Blood stopping tourniquets. And we've supplied what we've heard about 70% of those who need them are now, they now have. And then, but at least what we've heard that only 30% soldiers and defenders of territorial defense units, only 30% would have first aid kits. So we are definitely focusing on that. Plus, we have instructors in Ukraine who are providing training for soldiers. That's a great thing too, because without any training, people don't know how to use first aid kits. There's specific items that need, you need training to use them. So those are number one. And of course, the personal protection gear. Unfortunately, a lot of our defenders go without helmets or without proper bulletproof vests. And that's a huge thing because they're expensive items. And I'm hoping that it can be done on the government level, because a lot of organizations are buying and supplying, but it's definitely like too much for small nonprofits compared to government help. So I think this is the main part. Again, it's like we try to save as many lives at the moment as possible. As an organization, for us, we still ask people to donate because it doesn't stop tomorrow. It will not stop tomorrow, and it doesn't mean that even if it stops tomorrow, the efforts will die off. No, it's actually going to be a lot of efforts to rebuild Ukraine, to help people, recover from trauma, recover from wounds. Physical and psychological recovery will take years and years. So unfortunately, it's a long process, and we still encourage everyone to continue donating. If you have supplies, send them to Ukraine. If you have items to donate, send them to Ukraine. It's going to be a long recovery effort for Ukrainians.
And as you mentioned, oh, sorry, Jack.
You talked about tourniquets and first aid kits, IFAKs, and I think it is the things that we need all the time, because it's like oil and brakes in the car. You have to change it all the time because it's like one use things, and we need it all the time, and much more than we have now. And also you told about the trainings, how to use it. I know that maybe 60% of soldiers really don't know how to use even the half of the IFAC.
Yeah.
We need the trainings, and I was on the trainings a lot of times, and all the time the new people came there and they watched on the IFAC, on the things inside, and they really asked the questions. What that questions, it was like very simple and like really, but after like few times I saw that, I understood that really a lot of people in Ukraine really don't know how to use the medicine, the first aid, and even the weapons too. And now they are fighting. They on the front lines already, and they still don't know how to use the 50% of their equipment in the right way.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, and we understand that problem. So, and I know a lot of instructors who also know the problem, so they're trying their best. They're pretty much going around the country, and we've had some trainings, for example, in Ivano-Frankivsk, and 500 people were trained in 4 days. For example, 100 people were trained a day, and then they would. We didn't know, but they pretty much left. They were deployed within a week after the training, right? So, and then more. So we didn't realize that more will be deployed. So the training was provided for 1 battalion, but actually, all 5 of them left, and we were deployed. All 5 left for the front lines. So we understand the need, and I know Ukrainians do too. So everyone's trying their best to get people educated on how to use first aid kits and how to give a wounded first aid care. So it's important. We understand that without any training, it's just useless.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great point. And we see also, every day, I think almost everyone in this country, knows someone at the front lines or someone in a hospital who urgently needs some equipment, whether it's a bulletproof vest or tactical boots or first aid kits or different medicines. And despite all the international aid that's coming this way, somehow there are these major gaps. And so it's organizations like yours, that are working to plug these gaps, because these, if every day you can help a few guys that are going to fight the Russians, it's going to make a big difference. And so the people that pay attention to those small details, that's where this will be won in this long haul.
Yeah, and I agree. Sometimes we think about several organizations doing the same thing. For example, us, Razum, Nova Ukraine, some other organizations. We think, oh, we're all doing the same thing. Or people might think we're all doing the same thing. Yes, we are doing similar and in parallel, but it's not enough. It is still not enough. Exactly, and we understand that. So, for example, we just received ventilators from Maryland State. They gave us 200 ventilators just a couple of days ago, and those ventilators are worth $5.5 million. And when we received at the ceremony, the governor and Maryland state officials, we thanked them, and they said, this is something we can do now, but we understand that it's not enough. We need to do more. And we said, yes, thank you. We appreciate your help. We know everyone's doing their best, but more needs to be done. And people understand that here as well.
I have a personal question. As like all of us, we are volunteers here in this war and trying to help. And I heard a lot of stories from other volunteers that it's first of all, it's very hard, to help people all the time, to give them like all of you every day, 24 hours per day. And we have a lot of stories when the people who you helped to tell you that, oh, it should be better, or the people who donate money like ask, oh, you still need money, what are you doing, why you need so much money, why government cannot do that. And after all that words to the volunteers start to think that maybe, oh, maybe I have to stop to do that job. Maybe enough. I don't want to more because I'm tired of that. It's like very hard
Yeah, so
for
Zach,
them.
Zach, so it's true in a sense what you said. Yes, we same here. People, like you said, yes, sometimes we get those cries for help or cries that we don't do enough, and even within our members, right? So we just had this someone saying, "Listen, I'm here on the ground, and why you're not helping Mariupol?" We said,
Yeah,
well, this is like, we are not doing anything to help defenders of Mariupol. Like, what do you say to that, right? So we get those, yes. And then also here in the US, sometimes people don't realize the amount of help that gets sent every single day and the amount of work that goes behind the scenes, right? So if you think about even like those like 10, like we shipped over 60,000 tourniquets. How it's done, like you have to find someone who the manufacturer, you need to get the invoicing done, you need to get accounting done, you need to get logistics done, how to deliver from point A to point B, how to distribute, who is going to be in charge. So all these things that are, and then all the paperwork that goes behind it, even like vests and helmets, they cannot be sent to Ukraine without all these documentations, right? All the paperwork that needs to be filled. Who is doing that? So it's a lot of work that people don't realize sometimes. What they see is a nice picture at the end. Oh, look, volunteer is giving boxes and boxes of supplies to this village or to this
yeah. And they think that
hospital.
boxes just growing on the trees, and we just
So and then just
took them and delivered. That's all.
exactly. So and then sometimes volunteers in Ukraine also think, oh, like how come it's not coming? And like, well, there are a couple of things that are happening, right? So one, the manufacturers here in the US, for example, all the tourniquet manufacturers of TMT and then Northern Rescue, the cats, they're backed up. The orders are, the amount of orders they've received is huge. So everyone is in line waiting for, now the lead time is 6 to 8 weeks because they can't produce, physically cannot produce that many. And like you said, Zach, it's just something that we need constantly, right? The Ukrainian army needs constantly. Just those are just dispensable things that just go quickly. And so just we're trying to explain to people what's happening. We're trying to explain sometimes, but sometimes you don't have time to explain. You're just like, okay, this is your opinion, but we need to get the job done. So we're just going to focus on that.
Yeah. In 95%, we really don't have time to talk with people who cannot understand, because we decide to not waste time on them.
Yeah, not waste time and energy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and but still, like for volunteers, it's very hard, because that people who really eating, they are nervous, and that the main picture for volunteers is drawing, like, for example, refugees. All of them are bad people, yeah, and they are not thankful for them, and blah blah blah, for example. And how you work with that, how you fighting with that feelings?
Really, we don't, to be honest, I don't really fight with with people like that. We understand the problem. We understand the issue. We try to be considerate. We try to explain. Sometimes it doesn't help, right? Sometimes people have their own ideas, and then we say, we cannot work with you if you have this idea. We know this is great, but that's we will not be working with you. But in terms of refugee, right? So this is something that people need to, or we call them internally displaced people. But to be honest, they are refugees, right? They're gonna be permanently displaced. They're not displaced just for a period of time. Those people lost everything. Well, many of them.
Yeah.
And so, of course, a lot of, and I hear that from volunteers as well. It's like, well, let's focus on the army and the territorial defense, just defenders only, and then we'll think about refugees. But that's not true. This is not the right approach. So we try to do that in parallel. while we're definitely, our main focus is supplying med stuff and saving lives to defenders, we have several programs for refugee centers in Western Ukraine, Chernivtsi, Lviv, Rivne, other regions as well, and we also help civilians with food, water. People need to survive, simply, right? And once the war is over, a lot of refugees will come back, and then they need to understand that, the world the world wants to help and wants to take care of them. They're not left with nothing. It's a trauma for life, if you think about it. Especially, we are really concerned about mental health of children after so much trauma that they've seen, and we have a program for kids as well. We're now producing, with the collaboration with Israeli psychologists, we are manufacturing special toys, psychological toys for kids, and the toy comes with the story and the instruction, so children can, especially those who had severe war trauma, would try to open up with the toy and then try to project some of their feelings and emotions to the toy, and kind of open up and be able to rehabilitate, right? To be able to recover and heal eventually. But those programs need to be, and we know that the statistics, and that we know that those programs, especially for children, they need to be implemented really quickly after the trauma, because the recovery and the healing process can begin faster, and then kids recover better psychologically. And it also going to have a very severe physical toll on kids who stayed in basements and then shelters, bomb shelters, for weeks or months now, right? So it's really like, you can't, the war, we understand the war, it has so many dimensions and so many areas that we can help. And this is what we're trying to do, because we understand that refugees, yes, it's not a burden. And sometimes, of course, those towns and cities those cities that receive so many thousands of refugees, they might feel, oh goodness, they're just sitting and doing nothing. But like, imagine you just, you have nothing at all left in your life. Your home is destroyed. You lost your loved ones. You're there, like, you don't know what your future holds for you, right? It's really
exactly. And I think, like, children is one of the most important problems now, because the children is it's our future, and in future, unfortunately, we will have a lot of wanted people. And now we have a lot of children who need help, but I think it's too much complicated problem, because not a lot of people can help with exactly with that problem, because children is too much specific job. So I think like your organization, like all organizations like that, have to focus on the children.
Yes,
because it's really very important.
Yeah,
for
no,
the future of
as
this planet.
as we close here, and Maryna, as you and Zach were just talking about, something I hadn't thought much about, but the psychological situation of the children that have gone through these horrible situations, whether it's in Irpin or Mariupol, or even the ones who had to evacuate to Norway and they're separate from their parents. You see the enormity of the atrocities that Putin's regime has unleashed, and how it's affected so many different parts of the world. But listening to you, Maryna, I see something good here, because you look at all the other wars in human history, and we didn't have the knowledge we have now, the ability to communicate, and so despite these problems, you're already anticipating these challenges that would arise, in someone's life 10 years, 15 years down the road. You're anticipating that, and so despite the horribleness of this war, we have an amazing network of people who incredibly smart, well educated, who can see not only what the problems are today, but what they will be down the road, and try to mitigate it as best as possible. And I think your organization, United Help Ukraine, because you've been doing this since 2014, you know how to hold steady, you know how to keep at least enough people interested to get the right support. And I think what you've created is the perfect model for what we need to get through this.
Well, thanks. Yeah, we hope we can keep it steady, and then we can keep American public and also global community engaged in supporting Ukraine. I think that's the most important part. Just keep the engagement, understand what's happening, and help as much as we can. We will continue our work, and we, as volunteers, we understand it's going to be challenging to have the high level of support for a long time, but we'll try our best to maintain as much as possible. But also we tell the world that Ukraine needs more every single day, and unfortunately the rebuilding process will be very long on many accounts, including human lives and their health, infrastructure, buildings, you name it. Ukraine needs to be rebuilt, and we know that the victory will be there soon. We know that Ukraine will prevail.
Appreciate, Maryna, for your work. It's amazing, and thank you so much for that. You're amazing. Your team are amazing, and everything what you're doing it's really great, and thank you for that.
Thank you, and I really want to thank you guys as well. And when we see people like Joe here, right, who lives in Ukraine, feels Ukrainian pain pretty much, and supports so much, and trying to get the message out, what's happening in Ukraine, what are the efforts, what people are doing, how they're fighting, what they're feeling. That's very important. And then again, we, like you said, we have an amazing group of volunteers that I cannot thank enough, because, and it's not just in our organization, in other organizations as well. And in Ukraine, I think Ukraine is probably famous for its volunteers now, because this is what really helped defenders, survive in 2014 and all these years. And then now, for sure, Ukraine still depends on its volunteers, and the volunteers are doing an amazing job. And I'm just hoping they have enough energy and strength to continue working. And really, I'm very, very grateful for all those who, despite all the difficulties and then lack of support sometimes, or energy and other things, they still work so hard and help so much. It's just incredible. The efforts are absolutely amazing. So I'm very grateful to all volunteers of our organization, United Help Ukraine, and others who are still supporting Ukraine and doing an amazing job with all the efforts.
Maybe this is a start, like, of the whole world peace, and maybe in one day we will be able to see the peace in the whole planet, where all people on this planet are helping each other and live in peace, and everything is okay without any terrorists like Putin and his crew. So I think we have to work on that. We have to fight.
Yes, thank you so much, Joe. Thank you, Zakhar. It was great conversation, and thank you to all the listeners. And we together can make this world a better place.
It was a Speak Freely from Lviv, Ukraine. Wait a second, before the побачення, please check our websites. It is ukrainianfreedomnews.com and unitedhelpukraine.org. So please go there, check all the information, and donate, and help us to win this war. Thank you, and now до побачення.